Welcome to Buddha at the Gas Pump. I'm Rick Archer. My guest today is Lucas Bergendahl, and here's a brief bio of Lucas. 4 years ago, I experienced an awakening that opened up different worlds and granted me access to the Akasha through telepathy, leading to a higher state of consciousness. Since then, I have dedicated my time to integrating this experience and helping others identify past influences that hinder the realization of their soul's full presence. I also assist animals through telepathy. I conduct workshops on esoteric teachings gathered since my awakening, providing keys to help people find their way home. And more about Lucas in a minute, or more with Lucas in a minute. A couple of house cleaning points or housekeeping points. Let's see. You might want to visit the website if you haven't been there, if you're just watching this on YouTube, batgap.com, because there are all kinds of things there that you won't find on the YouTube channel. One of which is an AI chatbot that is called the BatGap bot that has over 100,000 spiritual documents loaded into it. And you can have conversations with it that will be actually better than conversations you might have with ChatGPT or Copilot or one of those other AIs. And there's also a donate button, as there is now on YouTube. That's a new thing. It says thanks, I think, on YouTube. This program is made possible through the support of appreciative listeners and viewers. So if you appreciate it and would like to help support it, you could donate through PayPal on Facebook, on the BatGap website, or through the little button on YouTube, or through various other means, which you'll see on the donation page on BatGap. Okay, enough of that. Welcome, Lucas.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick.
Good to have you here. Lucas and I had a conversation earlier in the week, and he's one of these people that I kind of feel like I know him. I think you'll get that feeling too. He's easy to know and kind of a kindred soul, I think, to all of us. So you're 29 years old, as I recall, right?
Yes.
That's good. And let's do a little bit of chronological bio first. So you were how old were you when you first? Well, actually, I remember hearing you say that when you were a kid, you had perceptions of things that you just assumed that everyone had, but you later discovered they didn't. So what were you like as a little kid?
So how I was as a little kid is the story from my parents, because I cannot remember it myself.
Right, me neither.
I have, yeah, I have a few moments I can remember, but it's basically, I think what is most easy for me to actually explain is my latest awakening, because that leads to how I was as a kid. If that's okay, I go that way.
Sure. Yep.
Because I tried very much after I dropped school. I tried to fit in society, with like figuring out what to do with life, and try to be successful with this work or what to do. And the more I tried to seek success, the more I found this empty hole inside of me. And at one point, I completely burned out, and I went into a depression for a year where I only slept 2 hours a night.
Wow.
And it was actually one day when my parents, they came to me and they said, "You know what, Lucas, there's something we have to tell you. We have to tell you something from when you were a child." And then they started to tell me how I often talked about past lives, how often, like my own past lives, when I was sitting and playing with my toys, I apparently said to my mom, like, "Mom, now I know how I died in my past life." And then I told the entire story and such. And that was more like a daily routine that I often spoke about, either past lives or like what will happen in the future, or seeing spirits. When someone left the family, left the body, I like waking up the entire night, just like watching the spirits and such. So my parents had a lot of these. They often saw that there was something in me that was awakened to these worlds. And the more I tried to fit in society, the more I opened like an emptiness inside of myself that kind of drained me. So that's how I was as a kid. I was able to see my past lives, and I was able to sometimes get glimpses of the future, which would happen, which I said to my parents. Stuff like having a little brother or something. That's like a more classic one, but stuff like that. But also seeing spirits, and that also made me afraid of the darkness when I was a kid. So yeah, was a lot of hindrances trying to fit into the world when you saw spirits also, right? So,
Yeah, a lot of so-called spiritual people have a hard time fitting into the world,
yeah,
and they
yeah,
go through a struggle when they're younger. In fact, you have a picture of Saint Francis behind you, and I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon about Saint Francis, but he came back from the Crusades, and he was a sort of a macho guy, and then he got really sick, and then he came out of that and had this huge transformation. And then, his father wanted him to work in the family clothing business or whatever it was. And, he, in the movie, at least, he took off all his clothes and threw them around and just wandered off. But,
yeah,
he just said, I can't make it in this world. I can't fit in.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. And somehow I'm trying to fit in a little bit more still than he do. I'm not walking around naked in the street, and at least I'm.
Yeah. Well, if you did, you'd get a nice cozy jail cell to,
Yeah,
to sleep
exactly,
in.
exactly. So no, I'm actually like one of the things that I'm very dedicated to today is to help people that also have openings, because there's so many people who has these kind of openings that it's so hard to fit into society, and it's about finding the balance, right? Because some people has an easier, even though they're like very awakened and they have these open abilities and such. So it's actually one of the things that I'm really like I'm trying to really be in service of, because I know how devastating it can be if you don't know what's within you and you don't know how to react without you. I
Yeah.
like externally, yeah.
There's probably a lot of people watching today that feel that way. Incidentally, I didn't mention in the beginning that you're in Denmark. You're Danish, and
Yes.
just in case people are wondering what your accent is. So, how do you help such people?
That's very difficult. I don't. That's the thing with the way I work. I don't like have a formula of like what I do. People sometimes call it soul therapy. I don't really have a name for it, but it's basically I'm trying to find the truth within them, which they are not able to see themselves. I know that sounds very very normal or something, but that's like my go-to point. And then every session or every meeting I have with someone goes different ways. But there is of course these kind of fundamental parts that I'm using of myself, and I'm using, like you mentioned, I'm using the telepathy, and I'm using my opening to the Akasha, and also my opening to the past lives, which I have today, to help these people seeing what's blocking them, what's causing suffering.
I actually figured you were going to say that it's different for different people, which makes sense. You wouldn't obviously do the same thing with everybody. So, can you think of a typical session that maybe you had recently or whenever, and just kind of give us a sense of how that went and what your experience was with the person, and maybe and what you saw if in a subtler way about them, and maybe what transformation, if any, they underwent.
Mm. Um, yeah, I recently I had a client that came to me, and she saw one of my interviews, and one of my past interviews, and she felt that kind of call. She didn't know what she came for, so I sat with her and she said, I don't know why I'm here, but I just feel like I need to have that session with you. And then I have to, for me it's like I have to see the entire book of the soul's incarnation to figure out, okay, where is the chapter that something happened where we need to look into today, right, to figure out what's blocking. And so it's not like I see a book, but that's the best symbol. It's very subtle out there, so it's very hard to say. But I kind of like I scroll in, like you have the book and you scroll in, and I'm like, okay, there's something here. I feel okay. Let's look into that. And we, I basically like read her without her saying anything. How she had problems in her relationship, and how she had that she actually wasn't together with her husband anymore, and she had like she was trying to seek love from others, and at the same time, and um, yeah, like, and why that happened, because in her mind she didn't know what was happening. She didn't see that was like she didn't see saw that there was something in that caused her suffering. She just went to me because she said, I feel a cold. I don't know what it is. Of course, I have suffering. I don't know what it is. And then I kind of guided in to see what it was. And then we went into, okay, what is this about? Because I'm always trying, one of the things that I really try to do is always pull the energy back. So it's what's within you and never about the other person. That can be very triggering for a lot of people because sometimes it's easier to put it to others. But I'm really trying to figure out what is it like, what is the karmic pattern that is blocking you to see the truth within yourself in this situation that kind of sets you free. So that's my belief, that when we see the truth and we become conscious about that truth and we accept that truth and we embody it, it can set us free. And
Okay. I have a couple of questions about that. So one is, I can think of a dozen questions, but first question is like, when did you, and I'll get back to this lady, but when did you start picking up on people's past lives?
I've I became conscious about it like 4 years ago in my awakening. I had a moment, I had an experience where all these kind of abilities came back to me because it got suppressed for a long time. So within
came back to you from previous lives or from your childhood?
From my childhood.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. From my childhood. But also more strong. I guess it's more strong than my childhood. It feels like that, at least, because it
and even your childhood, you could say that was from previous lives. You probably had this stuff developed back then.
Yeah, that. Yeah, exactly. I believe so, because I know I've worked with it in past lives also, because that's one of the first thing I saw was like a story of my soul's own incarnation into this world. And so yeah, I believe so. When we go into these, when we are being born with these abilities, it's because the soul have already unlocked it in the past lives.
Yeah.
So,
and a general principle we could state here is that everybody comes into this life at a certain level of evolution, which is pretty much the level of evolution at which they left the last life. You kind of pick up where you left off.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly, and that's also why that's exactly how I use this, like with the past lives, because in the beginning it was very hard for me to see if someone was, when this opened within these 3 days, and I was walking on the street and I saw a man, and I saw how he jumped out of like a house in the past life, or like how he raped or murdered someone. I saw these kind of things just walking on the street, seeing people.
Was it like constant, and therefore really kind of overwhelming, or just occasionally a flash?
It was constant in a way. If I walked with my dog, I could meet 20 people. I didn't see it with all 20, but maybe 5 or 10 of them, something like that.
You'd get some image of them jumping out of a window or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I also had that, when the telepathic ability opened, I also got their thoughts. It came like if they were also like suicidal or what they were thinking about. And often it was very, very dark what people are walking around thinking about, right?
Yeah.
So I took a lot of time to like really isolate myself to figure out how can I
shut it down.
Train it so it will only be open when it's needed.
Right. And so did you accomplish that?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
It was a very intense half a year where I felt like a lot of joy and a lot of light to life kind of vanished for a long time, because it felt
you're picking up on all this stuff.
Yeah, it was very intense, very overwhelming, and all the dark stuff. So I went deep, and I actually, within half a year, I learned how to only open up when people, not even when they ask me, but when they need it. Because I also figure out when people, friends or like people who's also like a seeker, and they heard about this, and they were like meeting me somewhere. They're like, "Can you tell me something about?" I'm not doing it that way. It's only like if people come to me with like, and they really need help, right? They really need they want to heal. Then I'm opening up. I'm not opening up for fun.
Yeah, it's not a party game.
No, it's not. No, exactly. No.
You'd be a popular guy at parties.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? I had to make a choice also when I saw that I could become very popular. Like I could feed the part of myself who could like seek affirmation and such. and I need to drop that also and say that's not the path I want to go. I want to, I want to go this one. And yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Maybe it was after our conversation that we had the other day, but and maybe you and I actually talked about it. But we did, because we talked about the story of Jesus, after his 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, being tempted by the devil, so to speak, and told that he could be famous and he could, do all this stuff if he kind of got in league with the devil. And Jesus, I think that might have been the point where he said, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He didn't fall for it. But obviously, I can think of examples of people who had some kind of spiritual awakening and gained some kind of powers which were very attractive to people, and they abused them. They ended up using it as a tool for getting a lot of sex, or other, taking advantage of people in different ways. And that to me is like a pitfall on the spiritual path, which results in a huge downfall that you got to like make amends for, perhaps over many lifetimes later on.
Yeah, because you have a big responsibility when you open up to other people's energies. And it's one of those things that can break my heart much today, actually, to see, because the more you unveil, the illusion into the truth, and you see all these layers, the more I've done that, the more I actually see that there's not many healers out there who's not kind of serving illusions, I could say that way, or serving like an unconscious pattern. Because I I think the first part for me, the first experience I had with this was, I had my own kind of trip with this, where I needed to figure out, and we can go into that later on, because there's also some. I got tempted, and I got also, they also, like, the darkness also tested me, coming physically, and with voices and such, really like try to break me. um but we I don't know if we should, you want to
Well,
go into that, but
Well, we want to go into all those things. We just have to do it
yeah.
we have to make sure we remember them all, because
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now we're still on that lady that you had the session with,
Oh
who
yeah.
was
Yeah.
having trouble. So I had asked you about, when you first realized you could see past lives. I think the next question I'd like to ask is, what is the experience like for you of seeing a past life? And maybe you could compare it to something that people are familiar with. Is it like a dream where you have a dream and you visualize somebody's life, or obviously it would be a waking dream because you're not asleep. Is it primarily a visual thing? Does it involve all the senses? And how concrete is it, or is it just really subtle and vague, like an intuition?
Mm. It's very different. It's actually very, there's many different ways I use it. Sometimes I use it consciously. If someone sits with me, I know at 3 o'clock today I have a client and we sit today, so then I'm opening up myself. Sometimes things also comes to me in my dreams, or even in my knowing that there is something that I have to tell one of my students, or one from my family, or something like that. So it works in very different ways. But I think what you also ask is, like, for example, for my work, when I sit with people, how it comes to me that way, and it actually comes through impressions, through emotions. So the sensitivity that I have within myself, I feel those things within myself, and when I go into feel it, I see a storyline, I
Hmm.
see a happening.
So it starts with the feeling, but then it also becomes visual.
Yeah, it can become visual. I don't really use the visual anymore because it's not really necessary.
Hmm.
But it did for a long time. I just kind of like shut it off because there was no reason for it anymore, and it kind of like took a little bit of distraction from me being present in the moment.
Yeah.
So like I trained it in a way to know that what happened in that past lifetime. For example, like this woman we talked about, that she felt it was actually like a part of her that cheated on her husband in another lifetime, and through that she became a self-destructive pattern where she said, I would never deserve someone again, I
Hmm.
will never deserve love again. And that emotion she gave birth to in that past life, and that was still running in her mind, like a voice saying, I'm not, I don't deserve this. And I think many people, they know this, but for the specific karmic pattern of her, it was that emotion that she needs to go in and heal that voice. So that emotion is what I feel in my body, and when I feel that emotion, I see I see the knowing of like what happened, the experience of how that kind of emotion was being born, and
Huh.
it's running today.
Do you sometimes pick up on a series of lives for a
Yeah,
person?
yeah,
Like you
yeah.
might say, "Oh, I was a murderer, but then in my next life, I was a doctor helping people to help atone for my having been a murderer, and then I did." I mean, do you sort of get a whole storyline going over many lives?
Yeah, I often try to narrow it into 10 lifetimes.
Wow, even that's a lot.
Yeah, but it's not like I don't see the entire life, right? For me, it's just about figuring out what karmic pattern right now is blocking you for feeling more free.
Right.
So if I see, for example, that woman and she had that in another lifetime, I walk into the next lifetime, or like I tap into that to see how did it affected that lifetime, how it affected that lifetime. So I'm like jumping to see that karmic pattern, like tracing it to see how that unfolded in different lifetimes. So I don't go into other stuff. I don't go into stories about who she was, if she were a priest or queen or something. I don't care about that because it's not important. And that's one of the things that I realized myself, because many of my clients have also been people who have had past lifetimes where they heard that there was something very special, and then the ego starts to go into that, right?
Yeah.
And it's not always polite when I have to sit and say I don't see that, right?
Yeah. Was it you I was talking to? I was talking to somebody, and he was saying, it's amazing how many people thought they were Cleopatra.
Yeah, I have had 30 of them or something. Like that. So
She was talk about multiple personality disorder. I mean, Cleopatra was a crowded body. She had all
yeah,
these people.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. So and that's one of the things that really drains me, because people come to me often to like get confirmation, like I was this important, I was this important. And I get it, because if we sit in deep suffering, it's very nice for the mind and for the emotions to feel like, you know what, in a past life I was very important. Maybe I don't feel that important in this one, but I can rest in that. But it's just it keeps holding us into pain, and it's kind of hard to break the illusion often, but like to be the dream crusher in that, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Interesting. Well, I guess, who was it? Emerson or Thoreau said most men live lives of quiet desperation. A lot of people feel their lives are kind of mundane and boring and humdrum. And it's kind of a kick to think you might have been
yeah,
Mark Twain or Cleopatra or, Napoleon or whatever. But obviously, and this leads to an interesting question, which is, the how to discern between fantasy and reality. And I think this is something you yourself must have to deal with, because I've heard you talk about, Atlantis and living on other star systems and all that. And, have you sometimes thought or realized that something you were thinking was actually just your imagination, and maybe it's not true after all? And is that something you have to kind of keep your eye out for to make sure you don't do that?
yeah. I keep my eye out all the time. It's like a lifestyle, and that's also what I teach my students. Like, you cannot conclude anything you see. Everything that I've said in my past, I cannot sit here today and say it's 100% the truth. I can only do my best always to serve to see if it's the truth. And I always question myself to feel in, is there a part of me somehow that feels this is not fully aligned? And if there's just like 1% of that, I dive into that. And of course, it sometimes happens that I have seen, well, this thing might not be fully. I'm more careful when I sit here, like for example, like in an interview, because I know that's gonna like follow me. you know? But if I sit with a friend or something, I'm not as careful. But if you know what I mean, I'm more careful with what I say on interviews. That I've really dived into that to see. Okay, there's no part of me that feels any sort of disturbance or disharmony, because that's how it comes to me. If there's a part of my ego that wants to say, like part of the personality that wants to say something, that's why I know it's like part of the imagination. So it's
Yeah.
like a full-time job to always like question everything that comes, because things comes down all the time. I mean, that's my daily life. It just comes down, right? So I have to filter through.
No, that's really good. And I'm glad to hear you say that, because I know people and I've interviewed people who don't seem to be able to distinguish between, you know, reality and fantasy, or between imagination and something that might be true. And so they kind of, I remember this one guy who lived in Sedona, is like anything that popped into his head and he had a good imagination, he assumed to be true, and he was just kind of making stuff up. And, some of the stuff I knew, just historically and factually was absolutely untrue. So, what purpose does that serve? It's just kind of one can, and the whole new age world is full of all kinds of fascinating stuff, but we don't, it's like, as someone put it, it's Hostess Twinkies for the mind. I don't know if you have Hostess Twinkies in Denmark, but they're like these snack foods that are real tasty but absolutely no nutritional value.
Yeah, that's it. That's a perfect symbol. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, no, that's true. It's true. And I also see how, what was your truth at one point. Like, the more you dive in and the more you seek within for like finding the truth within yourself, you also realize, of course, there's things you said a couple of years ago that maybe was true at that point, but now you just hit a new layer where that thing is not fully like resonating with you anymore, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, that's good. I don't know if you've ever heard of Aldous Huxley, but he was a
Yeah.
philosopher and all. And he said an interesting thing about the scientific revolution. He said that the greatest innovation of the scientific revolution was not the steam engine or the accurate clocks or anything like that. It was the development of the working hypothesis. Because we came out of an age, the Middle Ages, where all kinds of religious dogma were considered to be true, and you could be killed if you questioned them. And and so the scientific revolution gave people the liberty to question everything. And so any idea could be, and that's kind of the way I do it myself. I mean, if somebody tells me they see angels, or that so and beings exist on the Pleiades or whatever, I think, okay, that's an interesting working hypothesis. Let's see how much evidence you can find for it, and maybe we can, maybe we can't. But I'm not going to just absolutely believe it or absolutely reject it. And different things have different degrees of evidence, different degrees of credibility. If somebody tells me the Earth is flat, sorry, I really don't think it is. But if they say alien beings have been visiting the Earth, yeah, there seems to be a lot of evidence for that. So, it's kind of like a matter of living your life around what you can really know through experience, rather than just imagining things.
Yeah, I agree. I can, for example, like, one of the things that, if I should use an example, what I've realized is often, like, when I get these things, especially when it's something where I feel, okay, this could be on the edge, right? When we talk about past civilizations or something, I'm trying to be very careful with what I with what I say, because I don't want to feed into like the entire thing you mentioned. I cannot remember the name, but that beautiful symbol you use with that dessert thing, the candy.
Working hypothesis.
And no, the candy. You
A
said.
Hostess Twinkie.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to feed that, so I'm trying to be very careful with that. But one of the things that I, for example, realized was this, with how there was, I remembered. I know that when I remembered some past lives where I could see that there was evidence behind it somehow, I knew how that felt in my body. So I was very, very. I was trying to be very cautious with how the different impressions that came from customers, how it felt in my body. And suddenly I realized, okay, there's something. There's a part that feels this way, and there's a part that feels this way. And this way I might be more cautious about. Where this way I'm still cautious, but I know this kind of feeling, there might be more resonance with it. So I dive into that, and like, one of the things, for example, that I realized was how there's different kind of civilizations at Atlantis. And one of the things that came to me was, what is important for me to know with that is not to like feed into like this and this about that and that that's important, but more like to understand that there was like a part in the Atlantean time where they were more in a dreamy state, that they were in a waking state, like we sit today and feel like we are. It's more like the consciousness was flowing and the cosmos was flowing with everything. And for me, that was like the message was to spread that. And I didn't fully share that until I realized that there was also saints from East that often said, like, the truth, you are closer to the truth when you're actually sleeping. So I start to like try to find other kind of evidence that someone says the same before I take it out, if it makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I have long debates with skeptical and atheistic friends about this kind of thing. Like speaking of Aldous Huxley, there's the idea of the perennial philosophy, where people all over the world in different cultures that had no way of communicating with each other came up with similar ideas about the nature of reality and stuff like that. And it kind of lends credence to the notion that, to their theories or their philosophies. Like people are actually cognizing this kind of thing in every culture, in every age. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that's just an example. But
yeah. And I cannot sit here also and say that I have seen the full truth, right? I mean, people, they need to resonate with what I say. And if they don't resonate, it's just like, pull it, like, drop it, don't spend time on it. Because that's one of the things that I actually also, like, I got that confirmation. Like, I've always felt like that, and people can be very intimidated when they sit with me, because some people, they might ask questions. And I also, like, when I'm private with some friends or something, and they ask me questions, often I answer. But people can also be very intimidated and say, how do you know that? And I'm like, well, you don't have to believe it. I
yeah,
mean, just drop it if you don't believe it. I'm not sitting here and saying that this is like the truth and you have to follow it, because I don't believe so. I believe that there's so many perceptions of life, and I feel like I'm just still a student of that. I don't know anything. It's like, the more I realize stuff, the more I realize that I don't know anything.
that's a
And
great
it's
attitude. I think that might be what the Zen people meant by beginner's mind. No matter how advanced you are, it's actually good to have beginner's mind.
Yeah, makes
To
sense.
have the
Yeah.
attitude of a beginner.
Yeah.
Because it's true. I mean, relative to what could be known, possibly, how no nobody. I mean, and nobody has more than a tiny fraction.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. And that's beautiful.
in any field like science. I mean, Albert Einstein probably would admit that he's at the base of the mountain in terms of what could ultimately be known.
Yeah. 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 And it's beautiful, right? It's beautiful that
Yeah,
we have to, like, find the different puzzles. And even when we feel like we have put it all, it's just like we take that break and that break, and suddenly we have the puzzle, and we realize that puzzle is only like a break to another one. And that's like, it keeps going that way,
yeah,
It's beautiful. It's
makes
really
life interesting.
Yeah, it does.
Well, let's take Atlantis as an example. So, obviously, we've heard a lot about Atlantis, and Annie Besant and the Theosophical Society, and all kinds of people have been talking about it for a long time. And I guess there are myths going back to ancient civilizations talking about it. And that for me is one of those things where I don't know. It's an interesting working hypothesis.
Yeah.
Maybe it's all just myth, or maybe there actually was such a place, and there will eventually be some kind of archaeological or geological discovery, that will confirm it, or at least lend evidence to it. Um, what is your thinking on that? I mean, you've had subjective experiences about it. I've heard you say things about it, but where was it supposed to be, and when did it supposed to end? And
So I think I want to start by saying that I actually agree with you in the way that it's not really important for me if it happened or not happened. It's
uh-huh.
more like, when it comes to me this way, it's like there is a message that we should use today, right?
Hmm.
So what if it didn't happen? Honestly, I don't even care, because what happened in the past, and this is why it's also not so good for my business of doing past life stuff. I don't care about the past anymore, because I don't believe that the past exists anymore, right? So,
Hmm.
but at the same time, I get these kind of messages, like, there's something happened in the past that you can use today to, like, help people get deeper into the now, to, like, be more soaked into, like, sucked into the now. And so, as I see it, like, yeah, I just wanted to say that. But as I see it with Atlantis, like, Atlantis had three different kind of civilizations. Like, there's different timelines.
No, wait a minute. And is what you're about to say all coming from something you have cognized, or something you read, or what?
No, no, I haven't. I am not a good reader.
Okay. So you didn't read
When
about this. This is something that came to you
Yes, when
subjectively.
exactly, when I get something, I try to find it in the books to get confirmations.
Hmm.
but I don't know where to search, right? So
Right.
I have a lot of books, and sometimes, I sit here and there, and of course I still read to like also learn myself. That's
Hmm.
very important for me. But I'm not a big reader, so I haven't read any about this. No,
You
I
should try the BatGap bot. Ask that your questions.
yes, we'll do that. We'll do
Okay,
that.
keep going.
Perfect. Um, the thing that I saw was that there was three different timelines of Atlantis. And I saw this because the way I use telepathy is not only for me communicating with a dog or a horse or another human being. It's actually like telepathy is the way, it's like the connection between the soul and the human, right? Because there's a consciousness and there's a consciousness, and between two souls, there's a consciousness and consciousness. And that thing that relates those two is telepathy. It's like a communicative bond, you can say.
Mhm.
So when I got shown these things, it was like I was being taught. It was like, I had the opening in these 3 days and everything open. And then, like I went to school, I went to class, to learn all these things. And what I saw was that there was three different civilizations of Atlantis. And this was important to understand the development of the human being, like how the chakras were developed, because the different chakras has a different kind of telepathic vibration to use in different kind of healing techniques, different kind of ways to communicate with the cosmos, if it makes sense. I don't
Mhm.
know if it's
No,
too
so far so good. Yeah, keep going.
far so good. Okay, so so as I saw it, there's like three different stages of Atlantis. There was one long time ago where the human, like the soul started to take a physical form, and that was like what we call I don't know what the English word for that is. It's not instincts. It's like the self preservation. What you call it? The when the animals also they produce again and again. It's a little bit like instincts. I don't know the English word actually.
Well, that's a good word. I mean, okay, the soul
Yeah.
started to take a physical form, and I guess you're saying in other words, souls prior to that were existing as souls without a physical form, but they wanted to incarnate,
Yeah.
embody in
Yeah.
order to be able to function in a more material realm or something.
Yes. And
Okay.
the first thing that kind of got evolved was this kind of instincts, the
Hmm.
instincts. So it was like this, as I saw it, it was like this plasmic thing, from being an ether to this plasmic before it
Right.
manifested into the physical. And the first thing that got evolved was the consciousness of the instincts in that physical being.
Hmm.
So I saw that to like understand how the instincts work, because for me it was important to like it was I got shown this for understanding how important the instincts are to follow today, what to follow, what not to follow. Like it's like a compass. This the soul, if we should use the term that the soul is out in the cosmos, it's out in the ether, and is communicating down to the body to say, you have to go this way to come home. Because right now you're trapped, you're lost, you have to go this way. There's part of the instincts that helps you follow that way.
Yeah.
We're very disconnected from the instincts today because of the way we live.
Intuition is another good word here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But I don't use that word for this for another reason, because we
Okay.
come into that. I see it like there's different kind of ways as telepathy, like I said. So the instincts kind of like is associated with the solar plexus chakra when we
Hmm.
talk about chakras. So I saw this to understand. Okay, if I start to understand the consciousness of my solar plexus chakra, I can start to follow the instincts that something from the cosmos is showing me to go that way, and that's what I do today. So it's like it's also what you can call spontaneously living, right? It's not like I jump out of the
Yes.
cliff if I feel like my instinct tells me that, and it's not like it's not like that. But there's a very very delicate part of the instincts that actually show you the way back. And I say way back because I believe that today we are just confused, but we already know everything. We just need to realize it again. So that's why I
Yeah.
say it's like a way back, like a remember. But at the same time, cosmos always evolves. So that's the paradox. But I hope you know what I mean. So that was like the first civilization. But I saw like there was three different kind of civilizations of Atlantis, and like the intention with what I share now is to understand that I saw that because I saw the development of the human being with the different kind of energy forms, and to use that to help people find back. So that's why when I sit and I talk about my sessions is about talking about that past life, that's very conditioned because many things happen like I don't speak with the person about, where I sit and have a telepathic communication with, the energy system and the chakras to start to awaken this, if it makes sense.
Not, I'm not entirely clear on the last point you made, but keep going and keep
Okay.
explaining, and
Okay.
it'll get better.
So that's why when I shared this with, like, when I do sessions with people, I sit, and for the human being, I talk about the past life with the trauma, with the identification, with these karmic blockages. But at the same time that I sit and speak with that, I use a telepathic connection to talk with the energy system, the being, the different chakras, because I believe that all the chakras in the person, as I see it, they have their own kind of vibration, right?
I see. So
So
you're picking up on two sources of knowledge. One is you're
yeah,
tuning into some past lives, and the other is you're tuning into maybe their subtle body, or
yeah,
the different energy centers in the body, which they might not even be aware of. And
yes,
um, and then another thing I've heard people say is that, the dweller in the body, anybody's body, is actually just a tiny subset of the total soul, and that our full potential as a soul couldn't possibly even be contained in this body, which
no,
reminds me of that line from Star Wars where Obi-Wan Kenobi said to Darth Vader, "If you strike me down, I shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine." Uh,
yes,
yeah, so you're
exactly.
kind of I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're sort of tuning into this sort of higher soul, or higher self, or larger reality of what the person is than they themselves realize.
Yes, and I believe myself. That's why the sessions has these beautiful kind of miracles happening sometimes. Like this woman I shared with you, she just broke down completely and said, "I've spent 40 years trying to go to psychotherapy, try to go this, and you spend 1 hour and you just like you healed me. What did you do?" And I was like, "I didn't do anything." It's like because it was something in you that opened. I cannot force an opening. I can just invite it. But if
Hmm.
the person is ready, it happens. So it's like I didn't do it. It's not me. It's actually you who did it, right? And that's very important for me to remember, and also like always share that I'm not doing anything. I'm inviting something, but it's only when the person is ready,
Yeah,
right?
you're a catalyst.
Yeah,
You know how a catalyst works. It sort of facilitates the chemical reaction um,
yeah.
without interfering with it or something. It just enables it to happen in a way that it otherwise wouldn't.
Exactly. And this is how I use telepathy. It's like it's that I use it for the cosmic consciousness and the cosmic being, the subtle body to open. But people get freaked out because sometimes I see people, they are afraid to like come close to me because they feel like, oh, he's reading my mind. I'm like, I'm
She's
not.
gonna hear all my dirty thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes there's like, when I've been out traveling and do workshops, and some from the workshops, they come to introduce the kid to me. And then the mother says, and this guy, he's the one doing telepathy. Like the kid is standing behind the mother saying, I don't want him to read my mind. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm not
That kind
doing
of
that.
thing I mean, people can do that kind of thing. I was seeing Amma one time, Amma, the
Yeah.
so-called hugging saint, and I was sitting with a friend about 30 feet away from her off to one side, and she
Mm.
was sitting on the couch doing her thing, and music's playing, and she's hugging all these people and everything. And I started telling this friend something I really shouldn't have started to tell him, and she just turned and stared at me like, cut it out, and I said, okay, and I just stopped telling the guy.
Yeah.
But wow.
But that's actually, if we can go a little into that, because now when we talked about instincts and we talked about intuition, where I said for me, intuition is a little bit different than the instincts, because one of my practices, so to speak, is that I believe that telepathy is designed kind of cosmic being, because it's like a consciousness that connects to consciousness, right? A
Right.
soul, a soul, and a human, and a human and a dog. Like there's a consciousness that connects all these kind of things, like a web, and that makes us able to relate to each other and communicate, not only physically and like with using the voice, but also emotionally and
Yeah.
distinctly and intuitively. So, for example, when I devote myself, I'm like the same way as Saint Francis said, "Lord, make me an instrument of Thy peace." I'm like I devote myself to that consciousness to say, I don't know what I need to do, you know, and I just follow that.
Right.
So I'm not reading people's mind. But very often, what I say, people say, "Oh my God, I thought about that," and they say, "You read my mind." I said, "No, I don't. This is intuitive telepathy for me, because intuition is between two souls when they relate towards each other. I don't know what's happening up here in the souls level. I'm in the physical, but if I connect to this, I'm in the flow with the cosmic. I'm in the cosmic flow. So what those people might think about I can also think about, but it's not necessarily that I know they think about this. For me, that's like working with intuition, if it makes sense. It's following the cosmic flow. That is not my intuition. It's just it happens through me and I'm just following it. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, and it reminds me of trees. I have this book, I think it's called The Wisdom of Trees, that Pamela Wilson sent me. She's been on BatGap a couple of times. And there's this whole thing about how, I think it's called the mycelium or something. There's this whole network of fungi or something that's under the ground that the trees, it's like the internet for trees. And all this information gets passed through it. And like if there's some kind of infestation of some beetles or something that are going to hurt the trees, the word spreads
Mm.
around the forest, and the trees can maybe develop some kind of chemical to repel the beetles or something, or if there's a drought or all kinds of other things like that. But they actually have this network of communication, and so we do too, in terms of our the collective consciousness, as Jung put it, Carl Jung, or some deep level at which we're actually all the same person, right? And therefore telepathy is kind of just it's probably mediated through that deep underlying field.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like that's also what like many spiritual teachers, they also say your thought is not yours, right?
Right.
It just happened through you. But we somehow I intend to personalize it, and the more we personalize it, the further away we come from telepathy,
Mm.
because we're not connected to that. We go into our own little bubble. So that also means like when I go like through a process myself, when there's like a trauma or grief or something, and I know that I identify even more now with like the thoughts and the personality and all these kind of things, I have to close for that, because then it's not. I don't know if it's the cosmic flow that comes through me. It's probably my own kind of things I have to cleanse out again and purify again, right?
Yeah.
So it's that part where the thoughts that comes to you is a cosmic flow, but the more we identify with it, the further away we come from being with that flow somehow. The thought still comes. That's what I realized. The thought still comes, but if you don't like identify with them, you can actually use them for a way better purpose. You don't have to figure stuff out.
Yeah. So in other words, another way of putting it, if the wave realizes that it's really the ocean and it's kind of actually essentially one with all the other waves, even though they appear different on the surface, then I'm not sure what the utility of that would be, but at least it's a more realistic vision of what's going on, instead of the wave thinking, okay, I'm this isolated wave and I'm completely separate from that wave over there and that wave over there. They're not, and it's not the reality.
No, exactly. And that's actually why for me, when I go through a process and I feel like I'm being tested and like losing faith and all these kind of things, it's actually like going back to this kind of connection with the telepathic cosmic consciousness, to like feel like I'm going back to the flow, because then I'm not like trying to figure stuff out by myself, because the more I do that, the more I separate and believe I'm just a wave, when
Yeah.
I'm not just a wave, right? So it's like I'm trying to get back to that sometimes, and that's actually I've realized I don't need to figure stuff out about traumas, and I don't need to figure anything out. I just need to like let that flow happen, because it purifies itself, and
Mm.
that's pretty beautiful, actually.
Are you aware of the work of Rupert Sheldrake?
No.
He's been on BatGap. He's this British scientist who has been studying what he calls morphogenetic fields, and how there's a kind of different fields actually for different species, and for a kind of more universal field for everything, and things like that. And he gives examples of how certain ideas will crop up independently to different people. Like, for instance, Sir Isaac Newton developed calculus, but some other guy developed calculus at the same time without, collaborating with Newton. And there have been other things like that. And then he wrote a book called Dogs That Know When Their Owners Are Coming Home, which
Yeah.
he actually studied this very carefully, where the owner would do something very unpredictable, or and take a taxi, or show up at their, and then they observe the dog, and the dog would be like waiting at the door. It would get up and go as soon as the owner was intending to come home. And I mean, our dog, God, I just if we even think that we maybe should take a walk, the dog will come running down the hall.
Right? Yeah. You have to be aware of what you're thinking, because if you just think about it and you're not doing it, you're going to disappoint the dog, right?
Exactly. We have. In fact, Irene gets upset with me if I even say the word walk or give any kind of hint, because then if we're not going to actually do it, the dog will be very disappointed. We have a very psychic dog. You'd like it.
Yeah. And they are great teachers. My dog was also very psychic. He was the one that really taught me about, telepathy from one being to another. Because what I was thinking, he picked up immediately, no matter what it was. So I
Yeah.
feel I really have to be aware of what I'm thinking, because I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to
Right.
point him and such. So that was like a great Zen teacher, I could say. He was my
Yeah.
own.
And he knows how to spell too. Like, he's afraid of flies, because I think he's afraid of the fly swatter, because we get it out to swat the fly, which, and so then we started spelling it FLY, but then he picked up on that. We can't even say FLY anymore. So now we call him Hank. Hey, Hank's in the house.
Yeah, and that's exactly because the beauty of this is that there's so much to learn from animals. There's so
Yeah.
much to learn from animals, because they don't have that kind of I idea of like the personality, the ego, I want to call it now. I know there's many animal therapists and also other telepathy people out there who says that they have an ego. I don't believe so, because I don't see an animal that says I am sad. Sadness just happens in them.
Mm.
They just feel, they don't say I am happy. Happiness just happens in them. So for me, there is not an I that identify with it. It just happens. That's the flow. And when you are in that flow, you pick the impressions of others also, right? Because we all have that kind of emotional body. We all have the subtle body, the aura field that radiates out what we think and what we feel. And it's like a radio station, and they're just so open that, for example, when you say FLI, you think
FLY.
about the,
Yeah.
you think about the fly, which means that impression goes straight in. Doesn't matter what you say, they pick that up, because what you sense, what you think, hear, and feel, they pick it up, right?
Yeah.
And they learn the words to put it into that. So that's it's a beautiful example.
Yeah. It's funny you brought up the radio station, because I was just thinking that as a good analogy for what you've been describing, which is that the radio doesn't create the music. It's the radio is just a medium, or a interface with the electromagnetic field, which other radios can also access, and express the same music or different music if they're on a different frequency. So I think what you were saying in the last few minutes is that your ability to do this stuff is not your ability. It's more like you're just an instrument. Again, Lord, make me an instrument of my peace, of thy peace. You're just an instrument for this. And with that orientation, you have the right intentions and motivations. And if you began to appropriate it, like, oh, I'm special, then you'd get in trouble.
Yes, exactly. Because like I see it, it's not special to be telepathic. Like I said, we all have it. There's like your consciousness, I'm a consciousness, that connects us is the telepathic bond, which means that I'm not special because I pick up on it. We all pick up on it. I've just focused on maybe learning to feel it even more, but we all pick up on it all the time, all the time we pick up the telepathic impressions. That's
yeah. You can see how there could be civilizations, or perhaps have been, in which people don't need to talk out loud, because they're just so tuned in that like a couple who's been married for so many years, they can sort of pick up on each other's thoughts or whatever. But even more developed, so they could just all. I mean, you might imagine there are species who don't even have vocal cords, because they're just so good at telepathy, is the way they function.
Yeah, exactly. And I believe there is both in out in space, that there's many species that don't need voice, because they have this they are so profound in this. They don't need to talk. They're just in communication with each other. And I also believe there are also beings on this earth that does the same. It's like,
Yeah.
if you look at the way that some birds, they're dancing with each other in these big groups, right?
Oh,
How they
the
do.
starlings. It's called the
Yeah,
murmuration of starlings, where
yeah,
thousands of them just all move in synchrony. And scientists actually don't know quite how they do
yeah,
that.
exactly. That's what I call telepathy. It's
Yeah.
like, yeah. So
Yeah, interesting. I was thinking, we were talking earlier about Atlantis and things like that, and whether it's a myth and so on. And recently, a friend was telling me about Joseph Campbell's "The Power of Myth" series, which I had known about, but I've never actually sat down and watched it. But I want to do that. I want to make a point to watch it. And he was a friend of George Lucas, actually, and it was a lot of inspiration for the Star Wars series. But in a way, it almost doesn't matter whether something really happened or whether it's just a myth,
no.
because it can have the same value for the society either way.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. When I began to get this from Atlantis, I felt like, if people don't believe me, I took it very personal in the beginning. But I learned within a couple of years to because I knew with myself, it doesn't really matter if it happened or not happened. It's like the message that comes with it. It's like that's important, because the message that comes with it is something we need to use today. It doesn't really matter if it happened or not. And honestly, there's too much curiosity that dwells upon the past in ancient civilizations. I understand, because it's also like finding back to being more in flow and such. But there's just the same, like you said, it doesn't always serve the best to dwell too much in the past.
Mm.
Yeah. So,
Or or the future or
or the
what?
future.
Yeah.
No, exactly.
Hmm.
I believe that's the separation. It's like the full separation we have of like being with the one beloved. That's what I call the cosmos, and what people would call God also, and these kind of things. I believe that separation, the more we understand, the more we realize, because it's easy to sit mentally and say, well, the past doesn't exist and the future doesn't exist, right? But fully experience it, that's another thing. But first, for that, we need to kind of like drop the seeking of these two things, right? And it's very hard for the person to do. It's for the personality really wants to hold on to it, but
Yeah. Which is
that
not to say we can't learn from the past, right? I mean,
oh,
there's someone said those who forget the past or don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. You know,
yeah,
so obviously we can learn what is a good thing to do and what's not a good thing to do based upon what past people have done.
yeah.
So I don't think that's what you're saying, right?
No, 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 no. I mean more in the way of like what I felt in the past, or like sometimes we hold on to the past too much. That's what I mean.
Oh,
It's like important to
like
reflect upon the unconscious patterns to enlighten them into consciousness.
yeah.
But
Like if
yeah,
we lament over, our childhood and what our parents did and that kind of thing, and just keep obsessing about that when we're 50 or 60 years old,
yeah.
you know,
Yeah, exactly, exactly. That's what I
yeah.
mean. I've seen that also with many people. They go to breath work every week, and they go to every ayahuasca 10 times a year to heal the same trauma.
Hmm.
And they hold on to that past so much that they kind of feed it again. They feed the same trauma by trying to heal it.
Because you put
And
your attention on it, and that to which you put your attention grows stronger in your life, right?
yes. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I mean, because I totally believe, and I do that with myself all the time. I reflect upon the past to see unconscious patterns, and I also reflect upon the things that I see, and with that we can learn from history, and we can learn from all these things. So I believe that's important. But it's like embodied into to this moment, right?
Okay, so if dwelling on past situations only reinforces them and is not really the best way of resolving such traumas, what
Mm.
is the best way or most efficient way?
Can you repeat that? What you
Yeah, like if dwelling, let's say you go to a psychotherapist or something and you're talking about all your childhood
mm,
issues and things like that, and you go on for years, like that lady said she's been to therapists for years and never gotten anywhere, and perhaps actually reinforced stuff. If that's really an inefficient way of going about it, what is a more ideal way? of resolving past traumas, because we do carry them. They do lodge in our systems, and
Yeah.
yeah.
So of course I believe that it's of course I also believe that the trauma, like the energy, I see that also, like the energy is inside the body, right? There's like an energy that, so of course it can help to do some kind of work for that. But one of the things that I think I want to say is that for me there's a difference between emotions and feelings and thoughts. And I see that. That's one of the things that I use in my workshops also, where emotions is like the wave. It comes like waves, where thoughts and feelings, they're like the energy pattern is like a circle. So what I used to say is like you're running the hamster wheel. So the more you think about it, the more you're just like running around and like you're just nourishing that the same thing. And what I realized with myself was that the more I just see myself as an experience, to know that, let me say it this way, I realized how many incarnations I've had, which means that we all have, that this little incarnation we have right now is just like a blink of an eye.
Right.
Then it's over, right? And then we have a new one. How important is this incarnation? It's not that important. That's what I realized. So why would I spend time on dwelling with something where it will already be somehow forgotten in the next one? Then I know, okay, then we have a next one. And that's why I say I work with 10 past lives. It's just 10 blink of an eye. It's not that much from the perspective where I see it. So why would I spend so much time trying to figure it out? Instead, I see myself an experience. I see myself as a soul having an experience, like an experiment also, So instead of like trying to figure out the content of the trauma, for example, I'm more interested in the mechanics of the mind, I'm not like, I'm studying like, oh, now I'm going this way. There's like part of my personality that goes this way, or part of it that goes this way. And every time I do this, I actually go into the faith of just, just to the divine. Whenever it's ready to be taken, just take it. That's, I know it's very easy to say this way, and of course for every situation it is a little bit different, but that's like the main practice to say for me. I'm not trying to figure it out with the mind, because then I'm nourishing it. I am looking into it and I'm feeling it, and through the feeling I'm finding into the place where I feel I'm ready to give it over. And if I'm not ready to give it over, it's fine. We cannot like rip it off, right? It's like if we would rip off like the mold of the snake before the mold was ready. Like it happens when it happens. That's my faith. When it's ready, it will drop.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you said that it's easy for you to say. You said something like that because, you said something like it's easy for me to say, or maybe I was just thinking that. But, there's a difference between a description and a prescription. So you can describe how you operate, how you function, but then if you're going to be a teacher of some kind, then how do you empower or enable other people to achieve the same perspective? Maybe they need meditation, maybe they need some techniques, maybe they need, this, that, or the other thing. They can't just kind of copy your way of thinking without being in your state of consciousness.
Yeah. This is why my work will go more and more over to have more students, which I can initiate in my cosmic consciousness. The opening I have.
How can you initiate them? How can you impart it or convey it, or
it's a way of being part of their daily life, with the things they go through. I see the human body as a filter through cosmos. So what I see is like a student comes to me, and then that student, it's like an apprenticeship, right? So it's not like you take a course in 1 week and then you're initiated or something. It's like I'm part of the flow of your life, and through that we see what kind of test that the cosmos and the universe puts into you, to see how can this situation help you purify your filter even more. Because the more purified the filter is, the more I have experienced myself that what doesn't serve you anymore that way, it will drop when it drops. Because like I see, even every feeling is its own intelligence, right? And that intelligence, what I have discovered is that even that feeling, it doesn't want to hold on. It's not like it wants to hold on, I'm not talking about the thought now. I'm talking about the emotional trauma that happened. That has its own intelligence. I believe everything has its own intelligence. The stone has its own intelligence. The water, of course, the water we have scientific proof of that today. But I also believe that the feelings have, because that's what I see, that's what I feel, that's what I work with. And I don't see that even the feelings wants to feel stuck there. I believe that everything is always seeking towards freedom, towards liberation. So it's like corroborating with that. So of course it's about giving love to everything, and that sounds very easy and like cliche. But it's more about helping people to opening up for themselves to that which they need to open up to through cosmos, so they can be a filter. Because then things being taken when it doesn't serve them anymore. Because often these traumas is also what locks us to not being fully open to these kind of abilities. Because if we use it from a traumatic point of view, we don't know if we're serving illusions or we're serving the truth, right?
Yeah, your statement, the feeling has its own intelligence. Some people have experienced that they actually are possessed in a way by things and they don't realize it until the thing comes out or releases, and then they actually realize that there was some kind of entity,
Yeah.
that was occupying, at least in part, their makeup, and there might be many entities, and they have to be kind of purified or purged. So that's one way of looking at it. It can be looked at in other ways, like just neurophysiological or something. But what do you think about that? And I guess you could say, if that is true, like in the Bible, you think about Jesus releasing or casting out demons, right? And the demons are clinging, holding on, but they ultimately, you get the impression they're happy to be cast out, because it was a miserable existence being being a demon tormenting or occupying somebody.
Yeah, this is a big question, and for that we need to go deeper into the entire game of the darkness, so to speak. And we can go that way. I would love to go that way.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah. I think I try to separate it between darkness and evilness. I see these two different kind of, I try to conceptualize it this way for like the mind to understand it better. Where I see darkness as lower entities of a lower consciousness that doesn't know better.
Right.
So, for example, when these kind of entities, like this feeling, it comes into you, they often comes through the astral plane, because the astral plane is where the feelings get manifested. So, through our astral body, these feelings, they pop in, and in the mind, we start to identify with it. This is why astral travel is like, we need to be careful what we are doing. And that's also why we need to be careful with the plant medicine, what we're doing, because we don't know what we open up to, and we get stuff down. And even we feel good right after, you don't know what's going to happen in the next life because you put something in. And I'm harsh with that, because I've seen so much of this, and it breaks my heart that people don't know what they're doing actually. But this kind of things is like the lower conscious entities. They are still like serving the light. If we should use that concept, they just don't know better. If one conscious being is here and another one is up here, this conscious being cannot see that one up here, because if it could see it, it will be up here, right?
Right.
So that feeling feeds of what it knows. If that feeling feeds of jealousy, if it feeds of anger or something, because that's what it knows, it just needs to preserve itself the same way as we need. We need food, we need love, we need this and whatever we need. That's where we are. They only know, maybe that feeling only know one thing to feed off, and that's what it's activate in us, right? But that doesn't mean it serves the bad in us. Sometimes they don't even want to be there. They just like, they have to exist, they have to feed itself, to like nourish itself. Because like when it actually does this, like the next step for it might be another feeling that might be a little bit more high vibrant or whatever we should call it. And suddenly it evolves, right? So I don't see that darkness as being bad. I just see it as a lower consciousness that needs to be enlightened, if it makes sense.
Yeah. They're trapped in the role. It's kind of like, I'm reminded of, again, I keep thinking of Star Wars today for some reason, but when
Yeah, go for it.
when Darth Vader finally got killed, um, he was like, I guess it was Luke who actually killed him in a fight. I don't know. But anyway, he was like, he finally broke free of his Darth Vader role and realized, his original
Yeah.
consciousness, and was grateful for being liberated that way.
Exactly. And this is why I think I can share this now. I haven't shared it before, but I have also done something that would look like exorcism in today's society. but I would not call it exorcism because people, they judge it to understand like it's the devil, and people feel so bad about it. Well, that's not how I see it. I see a feeling that completely corrupts the person in the moment. But if we can, like, sometimes I can use like a telepathic connection. I'm not that skilled that I can do it every time. That will be amazing, but I'm not that skilled, and I'm not sure it's my path either. But sometimes when I can pick up that frequency, I can communicate with it, and then it pops up. And what I realize is often when it pops up, that the person, sometimes they sleep, sometimes they can't even remember it, sometimes they can remember. It's very different compared to where they are themselves. But it comes up because it also wants to be set free. So it's actually like a corporation. So that's why I can, of course, not call it like exorcism in the way of like, and everything.
Right.
But it's a little bit the same, because something like an entity leaves the body, and it doesn't feel good in the moment. It doesn't. It does
Uh,
feel good afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards. Yeah. I mean, can that be dangerous for you? Locking horns with these entities?
And not this one. This is very calm, because they don't have any bad intention. When we
Mm,
talk about evilness, it's different. Then I need to be way more aware.
yeah.
Because evilness is that which is conscious but just choose it in another way.
Yeah. When you think about it, anything that's negative or evil, any person, any being which is playing a negative role, it's not their ultimate destiny. And therefore it's not ultimately what they really want to be doing.
No.
So they're just kind of in it at that time.
Yeah.
And like, you wouldn't, as Jesus said, forgive them, Father, they know what not they do. You wouldn't want to be one of the guys nailing him to the cross, or you wouldn't want to be a guard in a Nazi death camp. But people, have kind of gotten stuck in these dark destinies, dark roles, and ultimately everyone needs to be liberated from all such things and rise to their full height of possibility.
Yeah, and that's exactly where something like traumas and these kind of wounds they can really call upon bad energy that just like sucks the life out of you. If I should use that dramatic phrase, but that's what I see sometimes, and but at the same time, we should not judge what is evil, because let's be honest, most of us have had troubles in our life where someone we have an argument with someone, maybe an ex-lover or a friend, and it never really got healed. So that person might see you now as someone that was manipulative or narcissistic or something, and you maybe see that person as the same. Like, who's right in this? Right? There's two different perceptions seeing the same kind of reality in the middle. Like, who's actually like who's right? So we can never know what actually is like. What is evilness, right? I mean, look at what happened with Jesus. People thought that he was evil, right? And you have seen
Yeah,
that with many masters afterwards. Many have been executed for the
sure.
same.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Okay. Change of topic. We've talked about cognizing the past and you cognizing past lives and all that stuff. Do you ever have future visions, like feelings for what might be happening in the next several decades or whatever?
yeah, but I have a lot of those, but I'm very careful with saying it because I know that the future is always in movement.
Right.
So I'm not one of those who use it to like talk about futures.
Okay.
I don't believe so. It's very, very rare that I do that, because if I say something, people might cling to it, and I don't want that, because then they cling to something that I might see different. Like, I could see it wrong, or maybe it just changed because something happened and the future changed. So I'm very cautious with talking about that.
Mm.
But yeah, I have the visions, and I have many of them. And yeah,
Yeah. A lot of people seem to feel, and actually a lot of ancient traditions have said that, we might be heading into some very dark times, difficult times. A lot of people might die, whether it's climate change or
yeah,
plagues or whatever. But that, if we get through all that, there'll be a very bright future, some kind of, new age of enlightenment or something. I mean, does that concur in general with your
yeah,
vision?
yeah. It actually does, and it began because it actually began by that, when I had that opening, I saw, oh my God, this world is like going a very dark place now. It's
Mm.
like it's not gonna be easier right now, and I felt so hopeless until I realized we just have to dive very deep so we can come on up on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's why I don't resonate with all these kind of challenges that says that some Galactic Federation will come and save us in 3 months from now or something. I'm like, no, we have to dive deep. And honestly, somehow the deeper we go, the more we can also grow the other way, right? It's like the native, they speak about the tree, the deeper the roots are, the taller the tree can be. The mysticism, they also talk about, the deeper you go in your unconsciousness, the more the consciousness can grow. It's like different concepts, but it's the same truth they talk about. And I see the same, like we are going a very, very tough place, but I believe it's for the better good. But right now it's about centered in the heart and being humble and yeah.
Yeah, interesting. And my feeling is that the more spirituality can be infused into the collective consciousness, the less difficult it will have to be.
Yeah, I agree. And right now we just see that the spirituality just kind of bursted up especially in like in the hippie times, right? Where we walk from the suppression, and then suddenly this beautiful kind of love and peace and all this harmony started to come. And now there's like this pattern of this commercialized spirituality where it's not so much about actually meeting yourself, it's more about feeding the personality in some ways, which it's like, but again, if you see it from a higher perspective, which I always try to do, I just see it's just a phase. Because it's just a phase, and it just has to happen because the spiritual entity was, if we could say it that way, it's not the best way to say it, but it also has to evolve down here with all the human beings, and we have to integrate and process it. And of course the ego needs to take a little ride with that also and feel good and special clothes and all the malas and being the best and all these kind of things, right? So
This question may be outside your expertise, but it relates to what we're talking about. Do you feel that there have to be cycles? And obviously there are cycles, so maybe there have to be, but very often, like after a big war, everything gets better again, like the World War II, and now Germany and Japan are close allies. And it was a horrible thing to have gone through, but now those countries are not apparently inclined to behave that way anymore. Do you have any thoughts about that perspective?
Yeah, I think I actually wanna bring it back to ancient civilizations again just a little bit, because one of the things that I see is that when a kind of group of conscious people, they reach a very high enlightened state, it cannot stay like that. It has to drop again. And we see that we saw that with, if we talk about Atlantis this way, but I also saw it like there was one of these openings I had was, again, we can call it a story, whatever. It's not important. It's more like what's behind it. I saw this temple way back in the time in the East where they kind of used, the sexuality through the tantric in a very pure and beautiful way, where it actually liberated a lot of souls and enlightened a lot of souls. But suddenly, it's like every peak when there's like a very strong light. At one point, the darkness comes and goes over the light again. It's like sometimes those things happen. So I see like everything is a cycle, and it's the same with religions, as I see it. When someone experienced the divine, God, whatever we want to call it, that's not something you mentally just are capable of understanding. It's like an experience. So it's like you see the snake. You see, if the snake should be the symbol of the God, for example, of God. Let's use that term. Then you have a prophet, you have Jesus, you have a saint or something that experienced that snake, and then suddenly that snake goes out to spread that to other beings, for them to experience the snake themselves. But when the body of that saint drops, then what you have left is the mold, right? So then somehow the followers of that saint, they don't have the snake to experience, they have the mold to experience of the snake, which is not the full experience. And suddenly this starts to roll, and then new illusion starts to come. And this is also how I see how the world is today. It's like, also because it's like a polarity, right? This entire universe is a polarity. And when something really good happens, something really bad also has to happen. It's like the joy and the happiness is only like, the joy and the sadness is only for the mind to judge whether it's good or bad. But both things happens, right? Both things happens. So that's also the same, for example, when I have had past lovers or I've had past friends or something, where they started to put me on a pedestal and say, please take me off it. just please take me off it, because I know if you put me up here, at one point you have to put me down here. It's like the polarity of life. And maybe not in this life, but then in another lifetime. And I don't want that. So please just put me off it. Yeah.
I think this metaphor of the snake you just used, I think you're referring to the loss and revival of knowledge, or how a saint comes and there's a huge surge of enlightenment, and then he dies, and then next thing you know, after a couple of centuries, people are being persecuted, in the name of that teaching, or it's just gotten totally warped and distorted. And so it kind of like knowledge crumbles on the hard rocks of ignorance, and it happens to whole societies as well as religious or spiritual revivals. Just keeps going in cycles. But perhaps growth is accomplished through cycles, and you can't just have, like you're saying, you can't just have the positive all the time.
No, exactly. Going back to the myth of Icarus, right? It's like flying too close to the sun, and the wings is melting off. We need the cycles, and we see that in the seasons also, right?
Yeah.
Most places, at least, we need both, and that's very important. I believe so. That's also why I know that the further I come out to feel the beautiful divine things that I cannot even explain by words. There's a lot of things I cannot explain, but I know when these things have happened to me, I just know, okay, there's a cycle now where I have to go as deep low, and I need to not judge that and just like embrace that. It can be very hard sometimes, but yeah, I believe so, 100%.
Yeah, interesting.
I believe that the other thing is a bypass for sure. Yeah.
Shadow work. There's a couple of questions came in. Here's one from Natalie Butler in London. She said, I have been told twice that this is my first human life and that there are a few others here from the same place as me. I wonder where I would normally reside or incarnate. That's her question.
Yeah. So what's the question about? Like,
well, your guess is as good as mine. She said, okay, so she's saying this is her first human life, and I guess she's wondering, if this is her first human life, where has she been for her other ones? Was she an animal? Was she on another planet? That kind of thing.
Of course.
Irene says, how would he know?
Of course, I'm not gonna go into like the individual, if that's okay, because that takes too much. I rather want to like focus on like the flow of the conversation.
Yeah, the principle of it.
Yeah. Of course, I also see that new souls comes down, but I also have to admit that it's not many souls that comes down in this time. What we could also call the Kali Yuga. Many of the souls came before that, because it can be very overwhelming to come down in the middle of that, like a soul, and take form and not have the experiences before. But those experiences can also come from there's many different layers of this. But let me just say that I don't see it like you have been an animal in the last time, because I see it's another kind of soul they have. At the end, it's the same soul, I know, but animals, they have soul groups where they drop down in a group where there's a bigger soul, and that soul has like maybe 100 of drops, which is the animal. They have a totally different game. And therefore,
like those birds we were talking about, they could, in a sense, be one big soul.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Or
Perfect
a school
example.
of fish or something like that.
Perfect example.
Yeah.
And therefore, I see it as a lie. I see it as a big lie that they say out there that your grandfather can be the bee or the worm. But I also have to say, I also understand why it's being said, because it creates humbleness to the people to think about like what they do with the animals. So I get the game. But from my cosmic point of view, I don't see it as, of course it's possible. It happens that you can incarnate, but it's not something that really happens. That an animal.
Well, I mean, if every worm eventually became a human, we'd have a math problem. I mean, there are probably thousands of worms in our yard, but there's only 2 humans on this property. And that's true of the whole earth. And, if you count all the mosquitoes and the butterflies and everything else, there would have to be some kind of conglomeration of if those things have individual souls, they'd have to somehow conglomerate to join together in a mass to form the soul of a higher being, because the higher beings just aren't as numerous as the insects and whatnot, and the fish.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's important to remember that there is difference, and it's not, I mean, all souls, they have their own experience, and it's not it's not only the human experience that actually is very beneficial. I mean, all experiences on Earth is very beneficial, and that's also why we should be humble to all beings, because there's something to learn from all, because they all have a specific soul that comes with a certain kind of delicate wisdom, right? And so yeah, of course it's possible that it's her first lifetime. I would say I don't really see it that often, not before the Kali Yuga at least, because many souls say, we need some time before that. Often you can meet, if you meet these kind of souls, it could be people with very, very heavy autism or something, where all the different worlds is very open and the senses it's very hard to be in a physical body.
Because they haven't had much practice at it.
Yeah, exactly, normally. But it's possible. But I also have to say, and I'm not going to talk about this personalized question. So I'm not saying if it happened for her or so, but there's also many psychics out there who's saying this to people. I've had many, many people saying this is their first lifetime. And
the psychics have told them that?
Yeah. Past life readers saying, well, this is your first lifetime.
How would they know, really?
Yeah, exactly, right. And that's also you cannot say that, because if maybe you could just not see them, right?
So you're saying that it's like the Cleopatra thing. Only one person was probably Cleopatra, and probably people having been born for the very first time as a human is kind of a rare thing. You're saying, and not as common as psychics would have you believe.
But I see many people who believe it's their first incarnation. Either especially they hear it from someone, because many people, many past lives people say it out there, but also you can also feel it yourself. But there is something for that to dive into, because that can also be a karmic pattern that creates an illusion from your past to look into. And that can be very, very interesting to look into, because you can open up to a new kind of value from your soul that has been blocked because of a pattern that tells you, well, this is my first. Because there's something you might not see, which if you go in and look at it, you can open up to beauty for yourself. You
say you've remembered a lot of your own past lives. If you had to apply percentages, what percent were human? What percent were, on some other star system or whatever? Can you actually answer a question like that?
No.
Okay. You don't have to then.
Yeah, I only, like, when I had the opening, many of the past lives came to me. Those I know today. I have not been curious about the rest. It doesn't, because I know if something comes to me, it's because I need it, and if I don't need it, it's the past.
It won't come. Yeah.
So I haven't dived into it. It's not my priority. I rather want.
Yeah. It's a hostess Twinkie.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay, let's do another question here. This one is from Rita Sponenberg from Pennsylvania. A lot of this conversation is reminding me of the interview with David Spangler from years ago. David Spangler was one of the founders of the Findhorn place up in Scotland, who had all kinds of subtle perception of, fairies and elves and, subtle beings. The negative entities, she's elaborating on that conversation. The negative entities just needing to survive. He used the analogy of the sewage in his lake, the trees, when he was whacking the ferns and picking up on their reactions. Okay, that's all she wrote. But she's just reminded. So basically, this is a guy, and I've interviewed a number of such people, who was, from an early age, able to have subtle perception and see all kinds of things that people don't ordinarily see. And it's been the nature of his whole life. And that's why he was instrumental in the Findhorn community. Yeah. I don't know if you have any comments on what she just said or what.
No, not really. Nothing really pops up to me.
Well, it's interesting about whacking trees. I mean, do you?
Yeah, can you elaborate that, because I don't feel it.
Maybe he was chopping a tree or something like that and feeling the pain, or ferns. I guess he was cutting some ferns. I mean, do you find it difficult to navigate life sometimes because you kind of feel the pain of, you don't want to step on a bug on the sidewalk because,
I follow. Yes.
Yeah. That kind of thing.
Yeah. I think I can very easily say that when I open up to other beings this way, I stopped eating anything from animal because I
Wow.
could not be with that pain. It was not possible for me to be with that pain anymore.
Right.
Anyways, both like I actually stopped with the meat before that, but I could not eat anything from it because it was too painful, and I needed to figure out like what's up with the plants, like how's this like working, how's the spirit working with this, and you know I it took me a while to realize that the plants is actually they are also here to like to serve us in some ways, and right now we are not in the place of that. But if there's one thing I could share about how I look at the future, because I'm pretty sure about this one, is that we come to a place of consciousness where we don't have to take a whole thing to kill it, right? So we don't have to take like a carrot or something where we take the entire being, but maybe we pick oranges from an orange tree where the tree still lives, so to speak,
Hmm.
if it
So
makes
you're
sense.
saying our food sources would be like fruit and things that don't kill the whole plant when we take some food from it.
Yeah, but we're not there yet. So as I see it, we came to a place. Again, my truth. If people don't resonate with it, take it or leave it. But I saw that the consciousness, there was like a new kind of opening in the consciousness that happened around the 1800, where we kind of learned not to need to kill animals. So before that, maybe we needed it to survive and such, but we came to a place where we didn't need it anymore, and therefore it's not supposed to happen anymore the same way. But we're not in a place now where we can drop all the vegetables, so we can still eat carrots and such. But it's like we take it in steps, so to speak. That's how I see it. It comes in steps, and as I see, one of the last steps, we can talk about the last step might be just like breathing air or just like catching sunlight, right?
Right.
But before that, by still eating, I see it like we only borrow, so to speak. We don't take like a full living being. We only take that which still lives. So we don't take a full being. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't try living on sunlight just yet.
No. No. No.
Especially in Denmark in the winter.
No, that would be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, even some meat-eating civilizations like the Native Americans were not wasteful, as I understand it, and they were reverential when they had to kill a buffalo or something for food.
Yeah.
They just killed what they needed and didn't. And then I mean the white men built railroads and they would across the West and they would stop the train and people would just shoot buffalo from the train and then keep on going. It was like supposed to be fun. And the Native Americans naturally thought we were insane, and they were
Yeah.
right in that regard.
Exactly. And that's also like one of the things that people often say to me, well, what about the Native Americans? Because they kind of killed animals. And I'm saying, well, the Native Americans, in my perception, had a very strong bond to Mother Earth and to all the animals. They probably know how to do it. I don't know it, so I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel like.
And also they didn't do it for kicks, they didn't do it for sport.
No, no, exactly. There was and it was a whole ritual and all these kind of things. And I'm not saying that there's not places where that's needed anymore. That's not up to me to decide. But
Yeah.
it's just like how I see it, that there's like a consciousness that happens where we kind of stop taking from others, and also at one point we will also stop taking from plants
Mhm.
and only borrow. Yeah, to be in like full harmony, like full balance.
Yeah. I mean, obviously there are realms of creation where this is already true. Not, I don't mean physical planets, but astral and celestial realms where people probably, I'm speculating here, and you can see what you think, but where people don't need to eat physical stuff in order to, or kill anything, or in order to survive. And maybe if you're on a gross planet like the Earth, there will always need to be something of that nature in order to survive, just because it's such a dense realm.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly, and yeah, I agree with you. And it's like it's the consciousness growing and evolving, and I just see it as we're going that way. That we're getting closer and closer to that place where we don't need to eat, but don't like we're not there, so just don't
Right.
stop. Yeah,
Yeah. Don't try to be a
I just see it like
breatharian.
in steps. Yeah, I just see it in steps. Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some other things that we could talk about that I haven't thought to ask you that you would like to talk about?
Um.
like aspects of your experience, aspects of what you do with people, or oh, another question has come in. Have you sent it yet?
Yeah.
Oh, let me check. Irene said, and you could be thinking about other things we can talk about while I check this question here. Oh, yes. Question 3, Peter Falk from Italy. What do you believe is your first responsibility here on this planet?
That's a great question. I believe my what I came to, at least until now, is that the cosmic consciousness that I have opened up to is something that needs to be conceptualized. You know, in the same way as you see other people with an opening where they kind of create like a concept, like you see with Rudolf Steiner or you see with someone else. It comes to me that my opening needs to be conceptualized for the future. And
Meaning you have to build a structure of knowledge about it. You have to like be able to explain it, writing a book or something like that.
Because my opening came in a way that I didn't know what kind of words to use for all these kind of things. You know, I needed to study words to understand like what it is that I'm seeing and feeling and knowing out there, to understand what kind of words can somehow describe it as like from a human to a human, like so the mind can understand it. And I have fought this for a very long time because I tried to stay very humble in a way of why should I be someone that created this. But I've came very recently to knowing that the more I try to judge my path of not realizing that there is something that needs to come out of this, then I'm just putting myself in suffering. Because it's not about me; it's about I have the opening to help people like find like help them find back. So that's my biggest responsibility in this lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just elaborate on what you just said. So you want to kind of codify the knowledge, or write it down, or record it in some way that can be conveyed to other people, and thereby to enable them to benefit from it. And I presume that even like Rudolf Steiner, whom you mentioned, or others, it won't just be a matter of reading a philosophy, because we have a lot of those. It'll be something that they can take into their lives and maybe practice in some way that will bring about a transformation on a deeper level than mere intellectual understanding could do.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's somehow a bridge between the knowledge and experiencing it or embodying it, because that's what I basically do with the telepathy. I have the Akasha where the knowledge come, but through the telepathy I experience it, and I get to transform through that experience. So exactly it's very good elaborated. It's bringing the things together and somehow make that like a legacy. And I don't know exactly how to do it yet, because it might require some help. I have some students who is already working on it. Because of course it's like what we talk about here is only a little surface of what it is that it actually possess, or like what it contains, or I don't know what to call it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, so this knowledge, let's say, if you were to, let's say, write a book or a series of books or something, would there be a lot in those books that isn't already in other books that have been written throughout the ages?
No, it's like, because at the same somehow everything is like they speak about the same with just different words, right? It's
Yeah, nothing new under the sun.
nothing new under the sun, and it will be the same here. I just need to find a new concept for the truth that I found, and I keep like diving deeper into like that experience that I have felt of that divine presence, that like the same as the saints and the I'm not saying I'm a saint and prophet, I don't mean it like that, but it's like that kind of opening I have. I somehow need to conceptualize that for the mind to understand. But it's not something. It's not something that is special on the first time on Earth or something. It's like the same that you can find in many other books. It's just maybe different wording and a different kind of setup with maybe experiences and practices and knowledge and such. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that's really good. I mean, I don't think that any spiritual teacher who ever walked the earth invented anything new. And in fact, even before there were human beings on the earth, there were probably spiritual teachers throughout the universe who were saying the same thing. And but each time, but there's a reason why people keep coming and having these insights, because it needs, only a new seed can yield a new crop. It needs a fresh sort of infusion over and over and over again in every generation. And so I'm just putting what you just said into my own words to make sure that I'm on the same page. But you just feel this calling to get it in writing and to systematize it, perhaps, so that as many people as possible can benefit from it.
Yes, that's the word. That was the word I was looking for. So thank you for finding that. I couldn't find that one.
Yeah.
But that's exactly how I feel, and I feel it like right now. I sensed 2 years ago that I will start to step more away from being a healer and more being the teacher. And it just came to me, and I felt okay. I didn't know why, actually, because I felt like the healing was it was about to go good, and there was flow, and I'm like, okay, so now I have to like go down. I just like, I'm about to grow, but okay, it started to go down again. Like after I got that, it's like the flow was not the same anymore. But at the same time, I started to have the students and all these kind of things, and it opened to me that it's because it's this path I have to go. I have to systemize something that people can follow. Exactly. And one of the visions that I have is to have like this book or this series of book or something that can help people, but also have like a center or maybe a few centers in the world where people come and they can retreat and they can go into learning more about this, and like like a little community somehow or something,
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can do all that stuff. I mean, you have plenty of time. You're only 29. You're like, how much? You're about 45 years younger than me or something like that. So you have plenty of time to do all this stuff. And of course, you never know. We all might die tomorrow, but
that's the thing.
and that would be okay too. It's all like in the cosmic scheme of things. But I'm inspired by what you're saying and what you're doing, and it'll be interesting to. I mean, I won't be around to see all of it, but probably. But it's. I think you're going to make a nice contribution to the world. You already are. And the thing about being a healer versus what you're now feeling called to do is you can only heal so many people. Not that they don't need healing, but it's kind of limited. And if you can provide something that can reach a much larger number of people, then they can heal themselves with that. Yeah.
Exactly. And the big change for me, because I've known this for a long time, but I've kind of battled it because I was afraid if it was like a spiritual ego or something, right? But when I walked around in India last time, or like when I was in India here in the beginning of this year, I was walking and suddenly there was this sadhu, this holy man, that just stopped me and said, "You're special. Come here and sit with me." And then he
give me a few rupees and I'll tell you how special you are.
Well, he didn't ask for rupees, so he just sat and he came and he said, "You have to come back every day, every night, and just because I need to tell you stuff." And bottom line, the first thing he said to me was, "It's a crime the way that you use your abilities. It's a crime. It's actually a crime the way that you don't take responsibility upon the opening you have." I didn't say anything to him. He just said, "Right now you're helping one-to-one person." And then he used himself an example and said, when he began, he went out to the jungle and he meditated for 2 years. And then afterwards, people built a temple at that place in the jungle. He used that like symbol for like me to understand that there is like a legacy that has to happen. It's not one-to-one sessions, right? And that kind of, when someone like just stopped me and just said that, I felt like, okay, maybe it's time that I take it a little bit serious, So
yeah, no, that's interesting. And you never want to lose the sort of one-to-one feeling too, because I don't know, it's a kind of a balancing act between broad reach and never losing the personal, feeling for individuals. I mean, and I've seen teachers who have a huge following, who have come to believe that individuals are dispensable. It's like the ends justify the means, and it doesn't matter if this person is discarded or this person is used for their money or for whatever. So, I mean, there just has to be that sort of intimate, personal love and compassion as if the person were your partner, and even though you might have thousands of people that you're.
I agree.
Yeah.
And it's actually one of the reasons why when I feel, for example, that right now I have to step way more into having students, to like have even more students that can take over the legacy and go out do the healing and such. But the thing is that I kind of attach myself to my students because I get so involved in their life. I care about them. So if they drop me, I actually get hurt. I'm not neutral in it. I'm not like, okay, then just a new one. It's not how it is, because there's like an energetically exchange with my students, which means I really like I feel them. And when that happens, of course, I also feel sad if they have to leave or something, right? So it will be easier in some ways to only focus like on one-to-one sessions. But now I'm still going to have one-to-one sessions. People can still reach out to me. I'm still going to do it. But my focus just apparently has to go the other way. And that's something I have to prepare to,
Yeah. And it'll take a while. And we'll see what we'll see what the extent of your range of influence is. I mean, different people have different ranges.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And sometimes a real small gathering can actually be more impactful than a huge thing. I mean, Ramana Maharshi just sat there on his couch with a few people staring at him, and relatively small setup. But look, the impact he had is still rippling throughout the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's also a part of me that would love that, because I'm not sure how it will turn out for me if it would be like a huge gathering, with too many people, because I like to feel the pulse with people also. That's how I work with it. And I would also love to still have like a private life where I can,
Yeah.
grow with like being a fatherhood and such, so it's like, I don't know. I'm not necessarily like attached to it has to be something big at all.
Right.
Yeah.
Another thing that happens is that when it does become big, then all of a sudden you have all these administrative hassles and monetary considerations, and beautiful women kind of like coming at you, and you have you kind of have a target on your chest, and a lot of spiritual teachers who've had big organizations have fallen prey to that.
Yeah,
they've gotten caught up in the money and the women and all that stuff, even if they were monks who came out of India. I mean, especially if they were monks who came out of India. This kind of thing happens. So it's kind of like the bigger it gets, the more challenging it becomes. And I know Adyashanti, for instance, who he recently retired from teaching, and somehow or other it really took a toll on him. He was I don't think it was entirely a health thing. He was experiencing a lot of pain, and the pain was very traumatic, and he ended up retiring from it. So you just there's always going to be temptations.
Yeah.
And you just always have to be careful. Like you were saying in the very beginning of this conversation, you always have to be self-scrutinizing and making sure that you're being true to yourself and true to the truth and things like that.
And I actually feel like I've already been like tested or like being trained towards this, because I have experienced like going to out in the world and travel to do my workshops and feel like a huge gathering already happened, and the women, they become very interested in you, and you can see there's a lot of money in it. So I've already learned from that moment, like to not in the way of like thousands and thousands, right, but still enough to like see, okay, there's something here, like understand the difference between following the path and just let these things be come and go, not come and go the way of like that. It just happens. It's not something with you, and you should not go into it. It just happens. So I feel like I've already been trained some ways to this, actually.
And it's funny because you might have actually been a spiritual teacher in past lives. You might remember some such lives, and well, do you remember such lives? And how did it go? I mean, did you kind of like fall in some instances, or get persecuted, or all that stuff?
Yeah, I've been. The short version is that the first thing I saw was the past 700 years, where I've definitely, like, basically just been haunted down and executed.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, and so that was pretty overwhelming to see. But I also saw the one where I actually fall in myself and left my wife and 2 kids to seek fame of spirituality.
Uh-huh.
And that's the one that taught me today, because since I remember that one, I got the taste, of how it would feel to like follow the fame or follow all these kind of things. And it doesn't taste good for me. Doesn't taste good for me. I remember
Yeah.
how it was in that lifetime. I don't want that. So
Yeah. Well, maybe all that stuff made a strong enough impression that you won't be tempted anymore.
that's how it feels. That's how it feels, at least. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, we're just about up with our time, but I'd be happy to talk a few more minutes if there's something you want to say.
2 hours just went, huh?
Yeah.
Beautiful. I think I wanna. I think I wanna share that where I am right now in my life is that, like I said, I'm opening up to take more students in, to spend more time on that, because I also feel like if I can contribute with like helping people with this, like opening up, can
Mhm.
be even more people can be helped out there.
And
But
how are you going to do that? They have to come to Denmark? Are you going to set up Zoom calls or what?
no, it's yeah. They don't have to come to Denmark. No, it's basically that we figure out where they are in their life and how often we have to talk, and so it's like there's teachings monthly. There is guidance. Like we text and we are in communication like every week and often during like what's happening. So
With a
it's like
bunch of individual students.
with a bunch of, yeah. So it's a big
Okay.
work,
Yeah.
but it's what I've been called to do, so that's what I'm gonna do. No questions asked, and that's so I'm opening up to that. And at the same time, I'm also in a place right now where while I'm doing that, before I systemize all this, which will be pretty big work, I'm very open to come out and in the world and do workshops to help people enlighten these things that I'm able to help with, at least.
Yeah. So somebody listening to this, let's say they live in, I won't say Pittsburgh because you've already done that, but Sedona or Boulder or any place, London or Italy or whatever, they could get in touch with you and they could maybe set something up and you would go there and do your thing.
Yes. And I will do workshops and I will do healings. Yes.
Yeah.
Both. Yeah, for sure. So because I'm in a place right now where I'm free and I'm capable of doing these things, and I just want to, use that in a way of being more in service of, yeah. So everywhere where it's needed, I'm open to talk with people about it if they feel a call for it. Yes.
Good. And so I'll be linking to your website. And do you want me to actually put, you do have a website now, don't you?
No, I don't,
Oh,
because I deleted it. I changed it, and I'm not sure if I should have a new one yet, because
well,
it's
you
like,
have to have a way of getting in touch with you. I could
yeah,
link to your Facebook page. I could put your
yeah,
email address on your BatGap page if you want, or
yeah, the email address. Or otherwise, right now I focused on my Instagram, because there's too many places where people contact me, and honestly, I'm not. Some of it, technology is very weird with me. There's many emails that doesn't go through, and when I had an email, there's many problems. So I'm trying to not have too many platforms.
yeah, okay. So we'll talk about that afterwards, and I'll link to you however you want. And in 10 years from now, it might be a completely different thing. So if I'm still around, which I hope to be, I'll change it on the BatGap on your BatGap page,
That's sweet
and
of you.
maybe we'll be doing another interview by then.
But I could, yeah, we can talk about it. But
Be
I
interviewing
can create a
Shri
web.
Shri Lucas G.
Yeah, it'll be something. Yeah, but no, I can easily create a web page where people can reach through me. Yes,
All
I can do.
right. So people who are listening to this can just look at your page on BatGap and whatever means we determine for them to contact you, they will find there.
Yes, yeah,
Okay, good. Alrighty. Well, thanks, Lucas. I've really enjoyed this. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I feel like I said in the beginning, I already know you, um, in a weird way. I just, kind of like have a feeling of affinity with you, as I'm sure a lot of people do. And we'll be in touch and look forward to seeing, what you do with your gift.
yeah. Thank you, Rick. It's been an honor for me also, and a pleasure to to be here with you, because I really resonate with your perception of life and spirituality, and I believe it's very important to meet those people so we can like have this beautiful flow together and contribute to the healing of everyone. And so it's been grateful for me too, and I'm happy to be here. And yeah, thank you for it. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, you're most welcome. It's just an opportunity for me also.
Yeah. So
All righty.